In my readings, when I see this coming up, I know there was a huge scale breakthrough that happened. If you practice astrology, this is a killer transit to keep an eye out for. The transits of the nodes in astrology indicate really fated karmic cycles playing out and can add so much context to the story of the natal chart. If you haven't seen my last video on what the nodes of the moon, also called Rahu and KETU, are, you can check this video out linked down below. I will not be running through the really basic ideas of what the nodes are just for sake of time. So if you are unfamiliar with what the lunar nodes are and their background and rationale, I do recommend watching that video first, linked below. I will also be taking some general astrology concepts for granted, namely the house system rationale and the significations of the planets. So if you are lost on those and you would like a full video explaining them, let me know down below so I can get everyone up to speed. Also, by lunar nodes, or by nodes, I will be referring to the lunar nodes, not other planetary nodes. Throughout the video, I'm going to use some examples as well to quickly run through what the concepts manifest as. But if you are all caught up and ready to dive into what the transiting nodes of the moon entail, make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you always are up to speed with what the stars have in store for you. Hi, I'm Marin, a professional astrologer, current college student, and author. I practice a blend of traditional Hellenistic astrology techniques with modern counseling dynamics in order to provide grounded spiritual advice. This video is also brought to you by RAHU Collective. RAHU is my newly launched company. It is a platform connecting spiritual practitioners with their ideal clients, so if you are part of the spiritual community and you are looking to post your metaphysical services, or you are looking for healing in general, you can find all the information down below. RAHU is basically a spiritual Yelp service, a space for you to hold space. So to recap, in a nutshell, Rahu, the north node of the moon, is associated with increase and insatiability, while the south node of the moon, KETU, is indicative of decrease or release. I'm going to get into the general understanding of the transiting nodes now and then walk through some specific case-by-case examples. First off, the nodes of the moons actually retrograde backwards through the chart due to their retrograde motion. So when you do watch the nodes retrograding back through your chart, you'll notice that they're moving throughout the houses backwards. Because the north node represents diving towards, you can look at the transiting north node in your chart as where you are really leaning into and heavily evolving forward, progressing. And because the south node represents decrease, you can look at the transiting south node in your chart as to where you might be escaping into or depending heavily on past patterning. These will be especially prominent as transits when they are in the cardinal houses, 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th, because those are the backbone of the house system and the really prominent areas of life. The most particularly crucial moments throughout these cardinal houses will be when the nodes are transiting near the ascendant, descendant, or MCIC. When the nodes are on your ascendant-descendant axis, this will be a time of really focusing in on either increasing or decreasing your identity or relationships depending on which node is where. And when the nodes are on your MCIC axis, depending on which node is where, it will be a time of extreme shifts regarding public image versus internal, very intimate states. Also, because the north and the south node are always connected, we must think of them as an interconnected axis, not as separate transits. Even though the north node will really highlight progress or evolving and forward motion, and the south node will tend to think of the past and dissolving. They are one cycle, though interconnected. The nodes can also transit in relation to your natal chart itself, which is where I see the pivotal turning points. The nodes take 18 years to complete their full cycle, so every 18 years the nodes will return back to their natal position in your chart, and this is called a nodal return. On the flip side, when you're 9 years old, the nodes are flipped and conjoining their natal position in the opposite way. The north node is on the south node, and the south node is on the north node. This is called a nodal opposition, and it happens every 18 years as well, but starting when you're 9. So it basically goes nodal return, nodal opposition, etc., every 9 years. Because the nodal axis in your natal chart is already showing your karmic story towards increase and decrease, whenever the transiting nodes are either in a returned or opposite position, they're activating the progression or further continuation of this story. Nodal returns will indicate the life story really being carried out in the next manifestation of the same themes. Look to the house positions for a complete context for what story of increase and decrease is being played out. Nodal returns also often manifest as a vertical crisis where there's a dire need to uplevel and personal transformation. Nodal oppositions can be seen as a crisis of this need for transformation and therefore can be a time of positive disintegration in how you're thinking about this cycle. Of course, positive disintegration and not negative disintegration when coming from an adept point of consciousness. So let's look at Kurt Cobain's chart as an example of both a nodal return and a nodal opposition. He's a celebrity chart that I love to work with because I know his life pretty well, so it's pretty useful to pinpoint events in his chart. If you've seen other videos, I do tend to use him pretty often. Yes, also I was using my own natal chart earlier, and both Kurt and I have our natal nodes in the same 3rd and 9th houses, which makes it easy for me to point out the chart examples just because in the video you're used to like looking at the same places, but obviously the nodes can be in any house axis pairing in your chart. So during his first nodal return, he had recently denounced Christianity and began engaging in really notable anti-God rants, even when living with his friend's born-again Christian family, when he was taken in from being homeless on the street, and the song Lithium actually came out of this experience and was really trademarking how his philosophical underpinnings came about for Nirvana. This was happening in the 3rd house of nearby cultures and beliefs, with the South Node indicating release, and the 9th house of higher philosophies, religion, spirituality, and belief systems, indicating a North Node drive towards more future-oriented thought. The 3rd house can also indicate nearby neighborhoods or areas, and the 9th house can indicate foreign travel or areas that you're not as familiar with on a living basis. And this was also the period where he began living under a bridge in Aberdeen, where he eventually wrote Something in the Way, which is super literal because the South Node literally relates to being dragged down or needing to let go. And he was literally speaking on how his environment and his current pressures were in the way. Obviously, these are huge turning points and moments that propelled him towards his dharma, his life purpose. And these tend to emerge more fully over time. The nodes do really tend to work like that in terms of planting one seed that turns out to be a collective shift, whether or not it's as collective as Kurt Cobain. For his nodal opposition, this was a really dramatic one because he did die during this time, but nodal oppositions aren't indications of death. It just so happens that he had other indicators during this time as well. Just wanting to put that out there. Nodal opposition is not a death indicator, it's a turning point indicator. And also astrology, just to recap, is signal, not causal, so it's not making any of this happen, it's signaling that these things are happening. So I'm not going to touch on his death in terms of this nodal opposition, it was just more of a vertical crisis. He was realizing that the transmission of his 9th house philosophies and really future-oriented, life-changing thought was more dramatic and more impactful on his personal mental health than he realized. With the 3rd house activated by the North Node, even with his natal South Node there, he was living in Seattle. He had returned to where he was from and being around these ideas he grew up with a lot of the time. Even amongst his now worldwide fame, he had returned to the culture he grew up with. And if you've had a particularly memorable nodal return or opposition, I'd love to hear about it from you in the comments below based on how it manifested for you and your experiences, so do let me know in a comment below if you are open to sharing. The nodes can also indicate really dramatic increase or decrease when they cross over planets in your natal chart. When they're transiting over the malefics, which is either Mars or Saturn, it will generally either be a supercharged Rahu or really draining KETU challenge. If they're crossing over the benefics, Venus or Jupiter, it will also be a really supercharged or draining kind of occurrence, but in a more positive, constructive way. Crossing over the sun can relate to personal life path, creativity, and egoic developments or releases also. Crossing over the moon generally indicates body or emotional increase or decrease, like physical body or really pertinent emotional states. Most importantly, knowing what houses that planet rules will add context into the state of what cycle increase and decrease is playing out. Overall, whether the nodes transiting are conjoining your natal nodes or other planetary placements, or the nodes aren't a planet, but other placements, they indicate a breakthrough moment, which tends to be a personal decision that ends up having fated consequences as to how your life is turning out. Even when the decision seems minor or petty at the time, which it usually doesn't, but sometimes it can be a more nuanced decision, more than likely you can look back later and see how hugely impactful it was on your life trajectory. That's why I consider the transiting nodes not just to be another transit in astrology, but a turning point in terms of your hero's journey. So if you are interested in learning about more the nodes in your chart or transiting nodes coming up for you, all my links for private consultations are down below, and I would love to read for you and look at your own hero's journey in your chart. Also, check out RAHU linked down below if you would like to look for an astrologer, post your astrology services, or dive into any esoteric physical healing art. If you enjoyed this and look forward to more videos like this, I invite you to like, subscribe, and let me know in a comment down below what other types of videos and series as you would like to know from me. And if you are interested in learning more about the current astrological transits of what's going on right now, check out these two videos over here to hear more about the current astro weather. Other videos as well, like my 2020 forecasts, are linked below for your individual signs. Otherwise, I'm sending so much love, and I will see you in the next video.